Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Cedar Falls Landlord Tenant Educational Workshop, and I really appreciate everybody's attendance tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to present to you the information about the new rental ordinance issues, some inspection items, and then also some code enforcement items that we'll have many presenters here to give you information on. To begin with, I'm John Schilling. I'm the fire chief, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's program. And to begin with, we're going to start with a video that we produced that will give a lot of good background as to how we got to this point with the new ordinance, and then where we're going from here with the new ordinance rules. And it should answer a lot of your questions. To get into more detail, we have Stephanie Sheets, who's the Community Services Manager. She will be giving a short presentation on the finer points of the new rental ordinance. And then we'll get into the inspection processes with Captain Bobby Wright from the fire department. Everybody knows him. And also some landlord-tenant issues that we run into on a regular basis that we can hopefully clarify and move forward with some of those. And then finally, some code enforcement issues with Officer Kari Ray and City Planner David Sturch. So at the end of the presentations, and I would like to hold all the questions until the end. This is on live television on Channel 15, so in the essence of maintaining our time that we're allowed, we're going to hold all the questions to the very end, but we'll make sure that we'll try to address every one of your questions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with this video. Well, thanks for your patience in watching that, and I hope that it has started to generate some questions and some thoughts on where we're at and where we're going. And to continue with that, we're going to turn it over to Stephanie Sheets, and she can walk you a little bit through the new ordinance requirements for existing and new rentals.
So, good evening. You'll see a lot of information from that video. I'll go over that again. What I'll try to do is then give you any updates or try to focus on any particular things where we've heard because of questions how that nuance would go, just so that everybody feels that they are up to speed on the ordinance. I think the first thing that we want to mention is you received the mailing, which is probably one way that you heard about this seminar that we're having tonight. And in that was a letter along with baseline information that was requested for existing rentals. And that baseline information, we want to start off by saying we've heard a lot of concerns about what was in there about having the leases provided, concern that that's private information, private contract, and really I think that was in there because that's part of the ordinance, but I think that the information that the form itself asks you to complete in terms of indicating the number of unrelated folks that are living in that unit, as well as the names to just show that relationship of, yep, they're 3 or 4 or 2, whatever, to provide that, along with the signature line that you're indicating the information provided is true and correct, will suffice for that. So a lease is not a requirement. We think that we can get adequate information from what's in the form. So we want to make sure that's clear, since we have had quite a few questions about that part of the application. So again, you saw in the video that we made a fair amount of a distinction between existing rentals and new rentals, and we want to make sure that people understand. There's a lot of misinformation that's out there, a lot of information where people say all rentals are too unrelated, and that is not the case at all. And so we want to make sure that people understand that based on your status, whether you are a registered rental, if you were a registered rental prior to the moratorium being passed, which was August of last year, then you have different criteria that apply to you than somebody who requested a rental after the moratorium, whether they got that through the hardship committee or whether they're coming through today or tomorrow asking for a rental permit. So I'll go through the existing a little bit, and I guess you might be wondering what are some of the numbers that are on there, and that's just referencing you to, if you want to actually look at the provisions of the code, that's the section that comes from. And I believe a lot of these slides are actually on the website as well for people to see, because they're the same slides that we went over with City Council. So again, an existing rental that's been registered retains the 4 unrelated persons until the sale or transfer of that property. There are within the provisions of that ordinance other termination provisions, like if the rental permit lapsed. If it lapsed for 6 months or more, well, then it falls under the new rental provisions. It's not a, well, it used to be a rental. Well, if that lapsed, you need to meet the current requirements. Other things, if that permit is revoked, that might get into the landlord accountability ordinance, and David will talk about that a little bit later. Those types of situations, there may be other ways that a rental permit ends up terminating. So we have those identified in the ordinance, and I've gone, for example, if the property is damaged more than 50%, that non-conforming status no longer is in place, you have to meet existing codes. So it's those types of things, and we just want to put that out there in the ordinance. And also, you saw in the video that paving the driveway, paving any gravel surfaces will be required. And one thing, when I have people come in asking me some questions, I've had a couple people that have gravel surfaces that are asking about that, and it looks like a lot of them end up having more gravel than they really need. And so we've even talked about, I'm not telling you have to pave every single ounce of gravel that you have. Perhaps there's some gravel that you don't need, and just remove that. So there's that kind of decision that's made, and we can help guide you on what the typical parking dimensions are for parking areas to help you know whether you might have more gravel than is needed. So there might definitely be some things that we can look at with that. It's not just paving everything. Now, the provisions for that, or the trigger point for that, is that paving needs to happen within 3 years of your permit being renewed. So if your inspection is next month, then you have 3 years from that date, right before your next inspection, that paving needs to be completed, or the gravel removed, or whatever the decision is that you make on that. If your inspection was 2 weeks ago, you have a little bit less time, because, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. If your inspection was 2 weeks ago, you have more time, because your next inspection, because this is linked to the inspection cycle that happens after the ordinance is adopted. So that person, has nearly 6 years to complete the removal of gravel or paving that gravel area. So it's all based on when your inspection comes up, and doing it within 3 years of the inspection since the ordinance was passed, which was last Monday. You saw this slide in the video. We talked about this a little bit, and I guess the point that I want to make clear on this slide is when we're talking about how we decide that occupancy level, it's pretty clear, the criteria here, and the ordinance says that all of them must be met in order to automatically stay at that level. So let's jump down to the 4 unrelated persons, and you may currently have 4 unrelated persons. If your conditions meet all of those currently, then you're guaranteed to remain at 4. There's no additional review required. It's only if your lot happens to meet some of the criteria under the 3 that upon sale or transfer, since those can't all be met, then there's a review, and if you feel that review is inappropriate, then you appeal to request to stay at the 4 unrelated persons. So I think that's the biggest thing that I want to highlight about this slide, and make sure that that's clear, that you automatically stay at the 4 unrelated if all of those criteria are met under the 4 unrelated. But you automatically drop to the 3 if all of the 3 are, if you can't meet the other criteria. In terms of new rentals, before we get into talking about that group rental permit and how that's evaluated, the ordinance provides that a new rental can be to a family, to 2 unrelated persons, and that 2 unrelated can even include those persons' dependents. So it could be, 2 people that have been divorced that are living together now, and maybe they each have 2, 3 kids. That still fits within the new definition of family. It's when you go to 3 unrelated people and above that we get into the terminology of the group rental permit. And before applying for a group rental permit, there are certain conditions that need to be met, or these are going to be verified, is about whether the covenants allow that or not, particularly in some of our newer zoning districts where there could be some provisions about rentals or about occupancy level. Also that other codes are met. Then the review of the carrying capacity, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Also the provision is this not guaranteed forever. We're going to monitor how it goes, and we're going to see what one of the provisions is also about if it's a landlord that has other properties, how have those properties been handled? Are they all in compliance? If we've had problems with them, how have those been dealt with? So we want to make sure that we're carefully looking at these situations and monitoring them a little bit more closely. The highest occupancy, if you get a group rental permit for 5 unrelated people to live in a unit, then that is going to have an annual inspection versus the 3-year inspection that other units have. So again, while we're saying that higher occupancy might be appropriate, we want to monitor that. Again, the paving comes into play, and finally, if you don't agree with the decision that was made, then there is an appeal option with that. Now, the decision is made by a staff committee. The staff committee includes myself, our fire chief, and our building official, similar people that were involved in the hardship committee review. And these are the criteria that we'll be reviewing any of the group rental requests for. Now, you might have noted, I believe I said it in the video, that in this case, the ordinance does not specify that all have to be met. It just says these are the criteria that should be evaluated. So that distinction on the existing, where I said it's an all must be met, is not the case in the group rental permit. So it's an evaluation of what's appropriate there. An evaluation based on character of the neighborhood, maybe amount of existing rentals that might already be there, also compliance with codes, like I mentioned already, the size of the lot. We do have provisions in our zoning ordinance right now that talk about when you have more than one unit, certain lot size, lot area that's required. When you have 1 unit, then when you go to 2 units, you have to have this type of area. 3 units requires more area. So we do currently have requirements in our ordinance. The thing is, a lot of these properties were in place even prior to when that ordinance was adopted. It was adopted in the early 70s, and so they fell under the grandfather provision, and so they're existing until there's a change on the property, or it's damaged, or the rental permit lapses. We'll also be looking at the parking, and parking needs to have adequate setbacks from the lot lines, as well as some buffering if there's other residences in the neighborhood. And finally, like I mentioned already, looking at the compliance record for the landlord on other properties if there are other properties they own. And I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to say. I think one advantage that we see to the tiered approach and the group rental approach is that particularly in a multifamily zoning situation, you could have that higher occupancy. So I know that we've heard concerns about how maybe rentals might spread out, or we might be displacing people, and this is one offset to how new rentals start off at family or 2 unrelated. Well, on the other side, there could be other situations where up to 5 makes sense. So that was one way that the ordinance provides for some of those dynamics. We do have on our website, I'm just flashing them up here and they're not legible. We have handouts, but they are also, like I said, on the website of kind of how the flow chart goes. So you're trying to imagine what the process might be or how this is going to work for you. We tried to outline what that means. So in the existing situation, outlining what the current owner needs to keep in mind, and then upon sale or transfer, what needs to be kept in mind. And the same thing is kind of outlining the process for a new rental. When you're saying I want to rent to a family or maximum 2 unrelated, well, go ahead and get your rental permit, you're done. If you want to rent to more people, then we go through the group rental review before the rental permit is issued. We'll move on.
What is buffering? Buffering of parking? What do you mean? I don't know.
Well, currently, the ordinance requires that a parking lot have a 5-foot setback from the property line. Also, there is a requirement for landscaping around it, so we'll be looking at those types of things.
All righty. I'm Captain Bobby Wright. I'm the rental inspector for Cedar Falls. A lot of you have seen me around doing your inspections. Some of you are familiar faces. Let you know, going off the slider, disputes between landlord and tenants is a private civil issue. I get a lot of phone calls about lease verbiage, breaking leases, deposits, all that kind of stuff. I tell renters that's a civil issue between the landlord and themselves. They need to work that out. I cannot give legal advice, okay? What I can do is, if it's code, in the code book, it's black and white, for example, missing smoke detectors, broken windows, I always have the tenants work things out with the landlord first, okay? They need to contact you all. I don't want them to come to me and be the middleman and try to work things out for them. Their job is to contact you first to get the items fixed. I tell the renters if they can't get resolution between them and the landlord, they need to come into my office and make a formal complaint in writing. Once it's a formal complaint in writing, it becomes a permanent record to my file, okay? Then I'll step in and figure out what's going on, okay? There's always two sides to a story. I get the renter's side, and I get the landlord's side. And I tell you right now, a lot of times I get comments from landlords that says they never contacted me. So a lot of times after that happens, stuff gets resolved, no issues, okay? City staff, such as me, cannot give advice to the renters. I always tell them get an attorney involved if it becomes a civil issue. The inspection process, pretty simple. I mail letters out to all the landlords with the current mailing addresses that is current in my computer at the time, okay? You get a cover letter, you get an invoice, and you get a checklist of what I'm looking for. Please read my checklist, okay? It's real easy. It's got a checkbox with everything I'm looking for. If you read my paperwork, there should be no reason why you can't pass the first time through, okay? The issues I've been having is landlords get it, they don't read it because they assume everything I checked 3 years ago, it's gonna be okay today. That is incorrect. Codes change due to state rules or whatever the case may be. Prime example, we have the new smoke detectors that are now code in 2014. So if you have 10-year detectors that were inspected by me from 3 years ago, those no longer code. We have to put dual sensors in. So if you want to know what a dual sensor detector is, I have a bunch of pamphlets right here. Feel free to come get them, okay? I also have business cards up here that you can get from me. If you're confused, call me. I have no issues calling you back when I have available time, okay? So one of the things I look for during the inspection process, holes in the walls. That's a bad deal there. You know, you got to get those patched, okay? You don't want your tenants who are smokers throwing cigarette butts down that hole, catching your house on fire. I see stuff thrown in there. I see food. I see all kinds of stuff in there. Pretty soon your house is stinking. Get those holes covered up right away. Broken windows. That's a maintenance issue. Got to get those windows fixed. It's a safety issue. You don't want those pieces of glass falling out and getting somebody cut, okay? Address numbers. You got to have proper address numbers on the front of the house. It's got to be able to be seen from the street. That's a big thing for police, fire, ambulance crews. That helps us tremendously, especially at night, okay? Stairwells, basement stairwells, second floor stairwells, you got to have that handrail on there. Anything that has 3 risers or higher, have to have a handrail. It's to protect your renters from falling down the stairs. You don't want to be brought into a lawsuit because there's no handrail because somebody's fallen down the stairs, broke their hip, and they're going to turn around and sue you because code requires a handrail. Make sure those are up. Part of the inspection process is my checklist shows GFIs in the bathroom, kitchen areas. Make sure you check them. Many times I show up to test the GFI, it's not functioning, it won't trip. It's a common occurrence. Over time, they do wear out. They don't last forever, okay? Push the little test button. If it trips, it's working, okay? Another good one is the covers missing on outlets. They get broken, missing. Check them. It ain't hard to look at them. Just like, hey, I got a missing cover here. Go to the store, pay $1.50 a piece, get them put on, okay? All this stuff can be done before I arrive. Another cover missing in the third picture, game box cover. It's got to have a cover on there. Another one in the bedroom there on the right side, missing outlet cover, okay? If I can see it, it's missing, I'm gonna write it up. So it's something you can do on a pre-checklist. Extension cords is a big thing. We don't allow extension cords in the house. By code, extension cords are considered temporary wiring less than 90 days, okay? So sump pumps is a good thing, big thing on extension cords. You can't use it. Sump pump is considered a permanent device. You can't move it around from room to room. That has to have a permanent outlet. Second picture, you can't see it very well, but this cord here is actually a bit overheated. It's twisted, it's coiled up. Reason is they were using a space heater on that extension cord and overheated it, okay? So that's what happens. Third picture, big one, combustible materials around water heaters. Big fire issue. Make sure you guys police that because renters have a lot of boxes. Fourth picture, you see a water heater. Somebody forgot to put a drip leg on there. Drip legs, there's a safety valve in case it overheats, blows off, doesn't scald anybody. It goes to the ground, to the floor. So if you replace your water heater, don't forget that drip leg on there. Smoke detectors, as I was saying, we require dual sensors now by state code. So I show up to your inspection, big thing I see right there, I come across, the batteries are missing, okay? Or they're missing off the ceiling. Big thing. You guys can check that before I arrive, okay? If you have a problem with the renters taking the batteries out, removing smoke detector, it is your job to call me to come out for an inspection. If it is indeed missing, I will snap a picture, I will cite the renter, $500 fine for tampering with the smoke detector. I have no issues doing that. I've done it before and I will keep doing it. Smoke detectors are there to save the renters' lives and your house, okay? Fire extinguishers, they have to be inspected. Okay, when I show up for the inspection, I have to have a current tag installed on the fire extinguisher. There's 2 companies in town locally in Waterloo, Superior Fire Protection and Pro Shield. Those addresses are listed on the back of my cover sheet with a checklist with a phone number and an address. Okay, we're right back. So like I said, if you do a pre-inspection walkthrough before I arrive and check everything I wrote down, there should be no reason when I arrive to pass you on the first try. If you pass, you get a sticker, you pay your permit, you won't see me for another 3 years. If anything I find is wrong, I got to re-inspect, come back in 30 days. Okay, I know a lot of you guys are busy, don't have time for me to come back, but that's the way it is. I'm there to protect your interests, your livelihood, your safety of your tenants, all that good stuff, okay? There's many, many times in the United States that, smoke detectors are missing, inoperative, where renters have died in a house fire, and they turn around and sue the landlord because of missing detectors, okay? It's your job to check to make sure they're there when they move in. Okay, I get phone calls every once in a while, the renters move in, they call me, say detectors are missing, the landlord's been called, he has not come out and fixed the detectors. By code, if somebody calls you and says my detectors are missing, broken, inoperative, you have 24 hours to come out and fix that issue. That is the way it is, it's life safety, okay? Pretty much hit the bells and whistles right there. You get your notices the first, second, or third day of the month previously before your inspection. So my April inspections, we're going out March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So you get those in the mail if you're due in April. Registration fees have to be paid up front. Pretty easy, okay? Remember what Stephanie said. If the permit expires, your permit expires without you paying your fees, it starts off as a new rental. So make sure your fees are paid before the expiration date of your inspection. So if you're due in March, you got till the end of March 31st to pay your fees, okay? If I show up for their inspection on March 15th, it's not paid, I'm gonna write it up as not paid, okay? I give you 30 days to get it done, but technically it expires at the end of the month, so if I come back 30 days later and you still haven't paid, it's a new rental. So make sure your fees are paid before I arrive, okay? I guess we're gonna have question and answers at the end of the session, so we'll go from there. So see you back in a little bit.
Thanks, Bob. David Sturch, planner, code enforcement manager for the city of Cedar Falls. I just want to kind of give you maybe some refresher courses on some common cases we see in code enforcement with landlord accountability and the inspection process. Officer Ray will kind of go through that and some of the cases we see kind of on a daily basis, but we'll start with, excuse me. Yeah, this is the landlord point system, if you remember that. Basically, that was set up 6 years ago with the idea of kind of start that dialogue between the city and the property owners. And over that time, we did create that dialogue, create those back and forth conversations with staff and the landlord. But I believe it's working very well. It's kind of just gets you to get out. If we get the notice out, you guys go out and basically explain the issues with your tenants. And these are just kind of a brief list of what we see a lot of in code enforcement. I have a full list of point schedules over there, but basically it's, we look at a rolling 12-month period. If you get up to 15 points, that's where your unit is suspended for up to six months. Well, I'll want to just let you know, we haven't had anybody get close to 15 points in this system. We've had a couple properties that had some parties there, and they got up to 10 points, but they basically see that, and they go out and explain the situation to their tenants, and the 12 months time period kind of goes through, and those points are dropped off. So that's kind of the situation with that. If you get points, there are the appeals process. We take it to the Rental Housing Board of Appeals, and basically state your case, and then they keep the points or waive the points. There's been some cases that we looked at that they junk vehicles, really not kind of in your domain to control a tenant's vehicle. So those are issues that the board actually waived those points. We had another case where we had a loud party. The landlord actually evicted the tenant and told that to the board, and we're like, yeah, that's the whole idea of this accountability ordinance is kind of back and forth, work with the city, and teach the tenants of what it is to be a good neighbor on that. But I'm going to go to the next slide here. Just want to go over some stats we've had since last August. And basically, Corey can kind of explain the whole grid system, but I want to tell you we are doing more active inspections. I've seen a lot of more inspections than that, but comparing the notes or the stats from 2013 to 2014, we've have less issues in 2014 than we had in 2013. And just kind of examples of less severe cases of bring your garbage can in at night. We're seeing a lot less of those. We're seeing a lot less of bulk item issues that are out at the curb for extended period of time, because you guys are telling your tenants to make that schedule with the Public Works, come in and pick those items up. So, in the long run, we're chipping and grinding away with this over time, and the idea is to really bring those numbers down so you do have good properties and good structures and good neighborhood qualities for your tenants and structures too. But you can see since August, last 6 months, these are the kind of the hot topics, so to speak. So over 500 violations, 1,400 inspections, and just under 200 of rental properties. The rest are owner occupied, because like I said, we're hitting every property in town. Again, it'll take 5-6 years to go through that, but we're really taking a hard look at building maintenance issues. So if you get a letter, we're looking for a plan of action from everybody. Landlords, owner occupied properties, and just let us know. what your plan is. I mean, we can extend that out. When it's this time of year, you're not going to do much, but kind of plan for those activities in the spring and summer months so we can turn these neighborhoods around and make things look nice. So with that, I want to hand it over to Kari, and she'll show you some slides.
Good evening. I just want to touch a little bit on some of the hot topics of what we're looking for when we're going out for code enforcement. As he touched on, we're looking at a lot of building maintenance right now. And even if I do send you a letter, what I'm asking for is a plan of action. So I'm asking within 14 days, you contact me either by phone or email and say, this is going to be my plan. For most people, what I've done, it is the winter. We've set a May 31st deadline. So we're very reasonable. And by that deadline, I want to know what your plan is for the summer on how you're going to fix your property, whether it's paint. You can see here we have some tall weeds in the two grass pictures. The fence is falling down in the one. Very minimal. The garage door is off track in the one. It didn't take any time. And then the bigger garage with the car in the photo had to be taken down, so obviously we gave them more time. But these are just some examples of, as we're going from property to property, what we're looking for and what we're looking for compliance on. Some of these, the property out in the driveway, this is obviously going to catch our eye right away. Coming into move out season, move in, move out, we ask that you guys help us out a lot with the bulk items at the curb. Many of you know our ordinance changed about just over a year ago. We only allow them to be out at the curb for 24 hours before their appointment with Public Works, and Public Works only picks up those bulk items. So if they are putting out garbage bags or just loose items, I'm going to be calling you or sending you a letter to go and get those items taken care of on your own. So you know that if I do call you or send you a letter for items at the curb, you have 48 hours. And then the city is contracted with a company, and if those items aren't removed, the landowner actually gets a bill. The past years, it's been a $200 flat fee. So these are the things that we're asking for you guys to monitor your own properties so that we can keep them clean, keep things moving along. And I think those of you who've been up on the hill or in those rental areas have noticed a vast improvement since we've started this program of the letters. And I do try to call everybody. If you have your email on file with Captain Wright, I'll shoot you an email to let you know right away to expedite the process. But you can see in the pictures, these are kind of extreme cases with the garbage and items out next to the garage. Those are the things that we're going to need cleaned up to keep the neighborhoods nice. These just cover some of the front yard parking. This is a hot topic too in all areas of town, actually. I'm going to probably be calling you on them. You'll get a letter having your tenants move vehicles back into the driveways, parking on the street. I do get calls from other neighbors. They're not happy with all the cars on the street, but in order to keep the neighborhoods looking nice, we need to keep them out of the yards. We'll open it up for questions. I think Chief Schilling's going to actually bring around a microphone, so if you have questions, please wait for him to get to you so you can speak to them.
And again, the reason for the microphone is because we are on television tonight, so if you do have a question, we'll pass the microphone down to you, and please speak about the distance I am from the microphone right now. So, questions? Yes, sir.
When you talk about paved driveway, does it have to be concrete or can it be blacktop?
It can include blacktop. It can also include permeable pavers. Years ago, people would just put in strips and there might be grass in the middle, so there are a variety of options, but no loose material.
For the parking, what about like water retention? Are you guys going to waive some of those issues?
There's nothing specifically in the ordinance at this point, but there is a trigger that I believe if the, gosh, now I'm not going to get that one quite right. There is a limit, if it's going over 7,000 square feet, I believe, that's when stormwater starts to be triggered. We have not relaxed that, although we've talked about, trying to accommodate these situations, and I guess we'll have to see what extent of paving ends up being proposed as to how that's going to be dealt with. Good question.
I have a rental house, 2 bedrooms up, living room, dining room, kitchen, and an extra room on the main floor. Is there a specific definition for a bedroom other than somebody sleeping in it?
In the rental code, you have to have a minimum of 70 square feet to be considered a bedroom, okay? And it must have a light source, and it must have a heat run, either ductwork or baseboard heat. And it must have windows to get out or a door directly to the outside. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Is the city going to pave the alleyways?
The paving of alleys is going to be programmed into the capital improvement plan. I believe there are 2 in the CIP in the budget for this year, and so we'll be continuing to work on paving all of the alleys over probably the next 10 to 15 years. So the city's certainly going to be working on its part of this.
The 31-foot width of the road is a big deal. So what's the standard width of the city streets around town, and exactly how do you measure it? With the curb, without the curb?
Streets around town vary from 28 feet wide to 31 feet wide, and that's measured from the back of curb to back of curb.
Back of curb meaning the height line?
Yeah, the rolled curb, and then kind of kick some sod out and the back part of that pavement on the back side of the curb.
Most of them will be less than 31.
It just kind of, we'd have to look at that and where the property is, because you're looking at, normally new streets are 31 feet, but then there's some older streets, could be 24 or 27 feet. So it just kind of depends on the neighborhood where they're at. A lot of times you got 31 foot, you got 2 side parking. Less than that, you're looking at maybe 1 side or calendar parking.
Does this ordinance apply to M1 district for single-family homes as well?
M1 district, the industrial district. Well, for new rentals, the family definition applies to any new rental. If you've got an existing, and then the definition of single-family unit is where we get into the occupancy level. So if you've got an existing rental in the M1 district, the occupancy level determination doesn't apply. It's focused on the R1 and the R2 districts where there's a single-family home, single unit.
For occupancy, if you have, let's say, a fourplex and a R4, are these rules going to be applying to that as well? Or is it just single family and duplexes?
An existing rental that's in an R4 district will not be subject to the reduction in unrelated, as I've outlined. It's in the R1 and the R2 districts for single-family units. So you've got a multiple family structure you're talking about.
What about duplexes then?
It currently does not apply to duplexes. It applies to single-family units.
Will it be switching, do you think?
That'll be part of the evaluation at 6 months or a year.
Now, the ones with more than 5 that have to switch to the annual inspection, is there going to be a fee on that every year then?
Currently, no one should have 5 unrelated people because the ordinance has been 4 till now. So when you get the group rental permit to have 5, then yes, it's an annual inspection.
Just reiterate the 5. If you have 5 people in the house, then the sprinkler code kicks in.
What is the code for adding parking off of an alleyway?
Well, we mentioned about parking areas needing to be, parking lot needing to be 5 feet off of the property line. Also needs to be 3 feet off of the alley. And then the dimension for a parking stall in a residential district is 8 feet wide by 18 feet long. Did I cover everything? Yeah.
We could certainly evaluate a plan, a parking lot plan that you may have. You can just bring it in, we can take it down, we can take a look at it and compare it to your lot dimensions and make sure it works before, we go ahead with it.
Okay.
I might want to add to that, so that's a parking area or parking lot. Parking lot is defined when it's 3 or more vehicles. Let's say you've got a garage off the alley and you have an approach to that garage, and maybe the garage is set 25 feet off of the rear property line, for example, so your approach is, 22 feet before you get into the 3-foot setback. That approach might be paved. That's not considered a parking area or a parking lot. That's your driveway to your garage. And a driveway can be 3 feet off the property line.
Any additional questions?
Just to clarify, duplexes in R3 and MU, that they won't be reduced from 4 down to 3 or any lower?
That's correct. At this time, the ordinance focuses on the definition of what a single-family unit is and looks at the R1 and the R2 districts.
I just wanted on the paper for you, I might be wrong, but I thought it said.
The letter asked for duplex information to be submitted as well for baseline information. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So is the paved parking also going to be required for the duplexes, I guess?
Good question. I've been saying paved parking for everything. The rental ordinance said that any gravel surfaces must be paved. So I think the short answer would be yes.
Some of us own a rental off at Searly, and that's a one-way each way. How is the width of the roadway figured on a one-way?
It's just basically the width of the one-way portion of the street that runs in front of that property. Yeah, I guess that's something we need to talk about. If it's a boulevard, do you look at, what we're looking at is what the on-street parking is and how wide that is and surrounding areas. So Searly's wide enough to have the on-street parking and the travel lane. Of course, it's got a bike lane too, but then you have to look at the other side of the boulevard. So that's something that we need to consider when we look at those valuations.
For parking, is it, if you, let's say, have a long driveway, it's only 2 that you get a count? You can't count, some driveways, I have a driveway that can park 4 to 5, but I would not be able to count that. Is that correct?
Correct. A driveway is not to be used as a parking lot or a parking area. A driveway is for access to the garage, access to the property. And so I think the video mentioned the tandem arrangement. If you've got 2 in the garage, for example, you can park 2 behind it and get your 4 if you've got a 4-bedroom, or even if you didn't have a garage, 2 cars stacked behind 2. But beyond that, it turns into a parking lot situation.
On the form that you mailed out, there's a little highlighted section on the front page. It says, completed forms must be received by August 18th, 2015. And then second line is, otherwise rental must meet all regulations as if it is a newly rented structure. Could you explain exactly what that means?
When I talked about existing rentals and I mentioned how there are some termination provisions, this is one of them. If the form is not completed, then you possibly sacrifice your valid existing rental status. So that needs to be turned in order to prevent that from happening. If it ends up that doesn't get submitted and then it terminates, then you fall under considering that you're a new rental, starting off with family, 2 unrelated, and then a group permit if you want to go beyond that.
So if they're already a single family,
So if a property is already a single family, there are no, extensions to the number of people in it. Did the forms need to be filled out then?
We still want the baseline information. There's a lot of information in there about what kind of parking is there, and obviously conditions can change. It can be a family this year and somebody else next year. Chris is taking over here.
Do the rights, so when you go to sell the property, let's say a parent wants to sell it to a child, does it go from 4 down to 3 then?
Currently, the way the ordinance is written is any sale or transfer would trigger that review and, automatically stays at 4 if the conditions are met or reduces to 3. There has been a request to take a look at that at the 6-month point to consider whether there might be situations of interfamilial transfers as to whether that should be viewed differently or not.
With this form that we have to fill out, do we fill a new one out every time you have a renter change, or is this just a one-time issue?
It's a one-time request for each property you have.
I'd like to emphasize that the information that you're providing on those forms is going to be put into a database, and it's searchable, and we can derive data from all that information, and that'll aid us in making good, informed decisions as we move through this process into the future also. Anything else?
You had mentioned on this form it says for all single-family and duplex dwelling units. Shouldn't it say comma in R1 and R2?
We'd like information on any rental properties, but we won't trigger the lapse of the permit or invalid permit on ones that are outside of the R1 and the R2. So you're correct on that.
For a property that has a driveway that's, call it single wide, what would be the code around trying to make that driveway wider? Which would include like removing some curb?
Yeah. So in addition to some of the rental code changes, we have some zoning ordinance changes that are moving forward. One of those is a clear definition of what a driveway is and what additions to a driveway could be made that wouldn't end up being a parking lot or a parking area. And so that code provides that the driveway will need to be can be the width of the garage. So if it's a single wide garage, then it can be single wide driveway, maximum of 10 feet wide. And then there are opportunities to do some of the things that we see on some properties, what we call a flare out. If you've got enough room on the side, you could do a 1-car kind of flare out that would be a maximum 20 feet long, and I believe it was 10 feet wide, I think? 8 or 10 feet wide. So to add a parking space, so then that potentially, if you've got a 1-stall garage, you've got one in there, you've got one on the driveway and one on the flare out. So you've got 3 parking spaces, for example. In the case of a 2-car garage, it has a 2-wide driveway up to it, and if you have the side yard to provide for a parking stall plus still meet the side yard setback, you could get 5 parking spaces, for example, as a part of the driveway.
And where is that code located? How do I find that code?
It's part of the zoning ordinance, and like I said, that's a change moving forward. Third reading at council on March 2nd. So then it will be adopted.
Okay.
Any more questions in the back?
One more.
So I own a 4-bedroom house, and upon sale of that 4-bedroom house, the new owner has to have an 8,000 square foot lot, be on a 31-foot wide street, have 70 foot of property frontage, and provide off-street parking, all 4 of those things to retain 4?
To automatically retain 4, yes.
So if I have 3 out of 4, but I have 60 foot of frontage on College Street, we have to have an appeal and sit down and...
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
If I wanted to rent my home for whatever reason, instead of selling it, could I rent that home?
Any property can be rented as long as it meets the code, so getting the rental permit and meeting, all of the criteria that we've talked about today. So, yes.
Any other questions? Chris?
So a single-family home does not have to have, if it's gravel parking lot, you do not have to pave it if it's owner-occupied, correct?
An owner-occupied that's an existing situation with gravel, no. But any new owner-occupied homes that are built, yes, they will be required to be paved.
Okay, and if you buy that owner-occupied house that was not paved, then it's the new buyer's responsibility to pave that right away in order to be able to rent that out.
If you want to rent it, it must be paved. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd like to, again, thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. And I think there was a lot of value in what we did here tonight. A lot of good questions, and hopefully, in your opinion, a lot of good answers. But I can say with confidence that we will have more of these types of workshops. As we go through the process with this new ordinance, including the new zoning ordinances, we're going to be taking a lot of notes, trying to figure out if we find some consistencies and questions that we're getting on the phone or emailed into us, so we can bring those out in another workshop such as this to help facilitate the good conversations we're having between the landlords, the tenants, and the city staff. So a couple other things before we leave. There's business cards up here, some extra forms. The flow sheets that were up on the screen are up here. And then over on this table, there's some additional registration forms if you needed more, and some more paperwork. And there's also some cards over there that are 2-sided. One side has the website information and telephone number for code enforcement issues or questions, and the other side will have the website address and telephone number for the rental inspections office if you have some rental questions. The last thing I have for you is I had a request from our Section 8 Housing Assistance Program people, and they are looking for additional units for the Section 8 program. So if you're interested in becoming part of that Section 8 housing program, then you can call Angie Fordyce, our Section 8 housing specialist, at 273-8669. Or her office is right next door here. So, again, thank everybody for showing up, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.